welcome once again to another video presented by me, Hermano de mi hermano, El Medio del Norte del Americano, JK Reacts. NBA history is full of what-ifs. Players whose NBA career has been cut short because of injuries. Derrick Rose and his ACL/knee. Grant Hill and his ankle. Penny Hardaway and his knee. Yao Ming and his foot/ankle. But possibly the biggest what-if is Brandon Roy of the Portland Trailblazers. Today's video that I'm reacting to is called Brandon Roy. Kobe Bryant said this Blazers star had no weaknesses in his game by a channel titled Forgotten Player Profiles. Like always, the link to the original video is in the description if you want to listen without my commentary. Without further delay, let's get into this.
He's probably the best player I've played against. To me, he's the best shooting guard.
Great voice. High IQ basketball player. Understands the size, understands pace and tempo. I mean, he's ahead of his time.
He had a career cut well too short. But in the few years that he was healthy and at his best, he was one of the most complete players in the league. He could score, pass, and rebound. He could defend and had no fear in the big moments. But he also let the game come to him. He never seemed out of control or trying to force anything and would slow the game down to his own pace. But if as a defender, you started slowing down too, his sneaky athleticism before the injuries could leave you in the dust or on a poster. But the injuries were his downfall. Knee problems that began before he got to the league, which just continued to get worse, forced him into retirement after just 5 years. He made a brief comeback, but once again, his knees shut that down. But Brandon Roy was improving year after year, dating all the way back to college. And it didn't look like that growth was going to be stopping anytime soon. And he did everything he could in regards to playing through the pain. But in the end, Brandon Roy bringing the Portland Trailblazers to the NBA's elite just wasn't meant to be. But that doesn't take away from just how good a prime Brandon Roy was. Let's jog your memory. A Seattle native, Roy played basketball for local Garfield High School.
Real quick, Chicago and New York City are known as hotbeds for growing NBA players, and people often forget about Seattle. But let me tell you something. Seattle should be right up there with Chicago and New York City. Rainier Beach High School in Seattle is also known as a premier NBA factory. This school alone has produced 7 first-round draft picks. These picks are Jamal Crawford, Nate Robinson, Dejounte Murray, Doug Christie, Terrence Williams, Kevin Porter Jr., and Marjan Beauchamp. Franklin High School produced Aaron Brooks and the LeBron stopper Jason Terry. Garfield High School produced Brandon Roy. And other Seattle area high schools, Bothell High School, which is 26 minutes outside of Seattle, produced Zach LaVine. O'Day High School in Seattle produced Paolo Banchero, and GP2, Gary Payton II, was also born in Seattle.
Junior year, Roy was averaging 19 points per game and led the Bulldogs to a 27-2 record. He had built on that as a senior, with averages of about 22 points and 10 rebounds, and had even decided to enter the NBA draft straight.
Sorry for pausing so quick, but he's playing high school basketball in the Key Arena at the time, now known as Climate Pledge Arena. How cool would that be to play high school basketball in an NBA arena?
High school. But after a pre-draft workout with the Portland Trailblazers, he began having doubts about how ready he was for the NBA. So he would decide against this and would instead accept a scholarship offer with the Washington Huskies, as he would be one of the best recruiting classes in Huskies history, along with future NBA player Nate Robinson. However, Roy had a learning disability, which resulted in him putting up low scores on his SAT. But then when he retook the test, his scores improved so dramatically that the NCAA flagged it and declared Roy ineligible. So Roy's hoop dreams looked like they were over, as he was working at a shipping port for $11 an hour. But he was determined, and with his parents' encouragement to make the NCAA flag him again, he would work in the mornings, then prep for the test after work. And once he scored even higher on his third attempt, he would be suiting up for the Huskies come January of 2003. Roy's coach, Lorenzo Romar, knew Roy was the team's best player after the first practice, as Roy had learned their offense in 45 minutes. But with a late start to his college career, and the team featuring the guard play of Robinson, Curtis Allen, and former Garfield grad Will Conroy, Brandon would come off the bench for the majority of the 13 games he played. And although he was only putting up about 6 points and 3 rebounds per game, he was shooting 50%. But this was the Huskies' first year under Romar, after nearly a decade with coach Bob Bender. And although they had the talent, it would still take time before they put it all together, as they would finish at 10-17 this season and miss the tournament. And for his 13 games, Roy averaged about 6 points, 3 rebounds, and an assist per game.
Real quick, I'm glad that he wasn't discouraged after his freshman season. After all, Bronny James as a freshman averaged 4.8 points, 2.8 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists per game on 36.6% shooting and 67.6% from the free throw line. So comparing Brandon Roy's stats and Bronny's, Roy was better than Bronny in 3 of those categories. Well, now let's get back into this.
His 04 sophomore season, Roy was now a starter, leading the team in minutes played and finishing as the team's second leading scorer and passer, as well as top rebounder. And the Huskies would also get an improved year from sophomore forward Bobby Jones, as well as welcome JUCO transfer Trey Simmons, as they would have 5 players who averaged double figures, leading to the 6th best scoring offense in the nation. But the trade-off was a bottom 10 scoring defense. So the Huskies would start the regular season 0-3 and would also go 0-5 to begin conference play, but were still able to recover enough for a 17-10 regular season record, which included an upset win over undefeated and top-ranked Stanford in the final game of the regular season. But Stanford would avenge this loss in the conference championship. Nonetheless, the Huskies would get a tournament berth as an 8th seed, where they would get a matchup with UAB in round 1, but would lose by 2 points, ending their year. As Roy only put up 7 points, but he would have 9 rebounds and 7 assists as well. And for the regular season, he would average about 13 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. Going into his 05 junior year, Roy was hoping for a breakout, but a meniscus tear versus Oklahoma in the 3rd game of the year would lead to him missing about a month of action.
Chat, his knee injuries so far, do you think it was detrimental to his overall length of career? Or do you think this is something that could have been easily manageable at this point? Let me know what you think in the comments.
Relegated to a 6th man role, with Simmons becoming the team's starter. But even with his reduced role, he still managed very similar output to the year before, finishing as the team's 3rd leading scorer and 2nd leading rebounder, while shooting a career-high 56.5% from the field and 35% from deep. But along with great years from Robinson and Simmons, the Huskies had the 2nd highest scoring offense in the nation and a slightly improved defense, as they would finish the regular season at 24-5. They would defeat Arizona for the conference title and earn an automatic berth in the NCAA tournament, where they would be a 1 seed. Round 1 would be a double-digit defeat of Montana, where off the bench, Roy had a team-high 17 points on 60% shooting. The second round would be an even bigger defeat of Pacific. With a good all-around performance from the Huskies, Roy would again have an efficient 14 points on 6 of 8 shooting off the bench. The Huskies' tourney would come to an end in the Sweet 16 versus Louisville, but Roy would again be efficient off the bench with 15 points on over 58% shooting. And for his junior year, Roy would put up about 13 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game.
He's improving year after year like a developing college player should. I'm sorry if it seemed like I was trashing on Bronny a couple minutes ago, but I was just comparing stats. Some people want to clown on Bronny just to do it. I may point out stats, but I'll continue to say that I wish he would have stayed a couple more years in college and got real playing time so he'd improve as a ball player quicker. He has the potential to become a quality NBA starter, but right now I feel his ability is lacking a little bit and needs to focus a little bit more, maybe in a G League, and hone his craft.
Robinson gone, Roy would assume point guard duties, which led to him leading the team in assists on a career high 4.1 per game. But his scoring hadn't suffered either, as he put up a team leading and career high 20.2 points on over 50% from the field, which included a career high 35 points on 5 of 5 from deep in a December 29th win versus Arizona State to push the team to an 11-0 start. The Huskies again had a dominant season with a top 5 scoring offense and a 24-5 regular season record. And with Roy leading the way, he was voted first team All Pac-10, Pac-10 Player of the Year, and a consensus first team All-American. Unfortunately, the Huskies lost to Oregon early in the Pac-10 tournament, but still earned a bid in the NCAA tournament. They would easily defeat Utah State in round 1, with Roy exploding for a game-high 28 points to go along with 5 assists on nearly 58% shooting. He would have another good game with a team-high 21 in a 3-point second-round win over Illinois, which included him going 11 of 14 from the line. But their season would again come to an end in the Sweet 16.
Is that 8th overall draft
this
pick,
time to top-seeded UConn, in a game that would see Roy score 20 points, but on less than 39% shooting, as Washington would fall in overtime. However, Roy did find himself in early foul trouble this game, as well as on the non-receiving end of what looked to be a late-game goaltend that could have put Washington up by 1. But this was the end of Roy's college career, and his senior season would see him average about 20 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. But his risk paid off, and Roy was now looked at as a top prospect going into the 06 NBA draft, where he would be selected in the top 10. As most know, Roy would begin his rookie year with the Portland Trailblazers. However, he had actually been selected 6th overall by the Minnesota Timberwolves in a pre-made draft agreement that they would send him to Portland for cash considerations and the Celtics draft pick.
At this point in time, I was still a huge Sonics fan, not an OKC fan. And every time my Sonics went up against Portland, I got a little bit worried because of the potential of the Portland Trailblazers team, because of not only Brandon Roy, but LaMarcus Aldridge, who comes to the team here in a little bit as well.
Had acquired in Randy Foye. But this wasn't even the first draft day move for the Blazers.
Yep, right here.
As prior to this, after a series of trades, the Blazers were able to strike a similar deal, which saw them send their 4th overall pick in the draft, Tyrese Thomas, to Chicago for Texas big man LaMarcus Aldridge, as Portland looked to have the 2 pillars of their franchise for the next decade. Portland was closing out their Jailblazers era, and on paper they looked like a team with potential. Along with their new rookie duo of Roy and Aldridge, they featured former All-Star big man Jamal McGlure and the best player on their team in a 6th-year Zach Randolph. Going into the 07 season, Roy was slotted to be a day 1 starter and would play his hometown Sonics in the first game of his career, where he would drop 20 points on 10 of 16 shooting. He would play a few more games before a heel injury would force him to miss nearly 20 games in the early stages of the year. The Blazers...
Talk about bad luck for a franchise who had hopes of a couple rookies turning things around for Portland. I mean, yeah. Portland had a bunch of bad luck for a while with players off and on through since Bill Walton.
6 and 15 when Roy returned, and although Roy's return helped, they would still go just 26 and 35 the rest of the year to finish at 32 and 50. And it didn't help that Aldridge would also miss a couple weeks to begin the year, as well as the last couple weeks of the year. But even with a shortened season, Roy was picking up where he left off in college. He would hit double figures in 49 out of 57 games he played, including 16 games with at least 20, while shooting over 45% from the field and over 37% from deep. And his all-around play was on display, as on top of finishing as the team's 2nd leading scorer, he would be the team's 4th best rebounder and 2nd best assist man, while finishing tops in steals per game. Roy would be selected first team all-rookie, and even after playing just 57 games, he would be a near unanimous rookie of the year, as he would lead all rookies in points and assists per game, while finishing top 10 in rebounding. The Blazers still needed time.
This right here still kills me to this day. The guy on the left, his nickname was Mr. Sonic, Nate McMillan, coaching an I-5 rival in the Portland Trailblazers.
He looked like a natural, and his rookie year would end with him averaging about 17 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. Luckily for Portland, they had the first overall pick in the '07 draft, which included 2 players who were both thought to be guaranteed stars. And after deciding not to re-sign McGlure and only having Joel Prisbilla on the team as a true center, they decided to go with the 7-foot star out of Ohio State named Greg Oden.
Speaking of Greg Oden, more bad luck for the Portland Trailblazers. Greg Oden in college looked like a legitimate big man. In 32 games for Ohio State, he had a 15.7 points per game average, 9.6 rebounds per game, and 3.3 blocks per game to go along with 61.6% from the field, despite playing with a torn ligament in his shooting wrist for most of the season.
For a lanky, all-around scorer out of Texas named Kevin Durant, and the Blazers were banking on Oden, as they would also send Zach Randolph to the Knicks on draft day, as it was clearly a new era in Portland, which was hoped to be led by their new trio of Roy, Aldridge, and Oden. But such a promising future would soon come crashing down. A couple months before the season began, Oden would have microfracture surgery on his knee, which would keep him out for the entire year. So now a Blazers team without their top overall pick, or their best player from the year before in Randolph, had to try and salvage the season. But with Roy and Aldridge leading the team, they would do just that. Their second-year duo both played at least 74 games, with Roy finishing first on the team in scoring, assists, and steals, as his career-high 5.8 assists per game would also be top 20 in the league. This year would feature a few career highs for Roy, as on top of having 8 games with double-digit assists, he would dish a career-high 12 in an April 8th win versus the Lakers. And he would also record a career-high 14 rebounds in a February 21st defeat of Seattle, as overall he would have 10 double-doubles and 1 triple-double, and would have 41 games with at least 20 points. Roy would help lead the team to 13 straight wins during the month of December, and after a first-team All-Rookie selection the year prior, he was now a first-time All-Star, where he would have 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists on a bad ankle in his first career All-Star game. And even though Oden, who had been most revered for his defensive ability, would miss the year, the Blazers would improve to a top 10 scoring defense in the league, with Roy receiving some all-defensive votes. So although the Blazers were still one of the lowest scoring teams in the league, they were still able to finish with a 41-41 record. But in an extremely competitive Western Conference, this wouldn't be enough for a playoff berth. And for the regular season, Roy put up about 19 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. So,
real quick, he just mentioned how stacked the Western Conference is. Well, just to give you an idea of how stacked it was compared to the Eastern Conference, as the East was known as at the time. In the East, Washington was a 5 seed with a record of 43-39. Toronto was a 6 seed at the very same record the Trailblazers had at 41-41. Philadelphia was a 7 seed at 40-42. Atlanta was an 8 seed at 37-42. Indy was a 9 seed at 36-46. And the New Jersey Nets, as a 10 seed, had a record of 34-48. Yes, I know those last 2 teams didn't make the playoffs that year. I gave you guys 5 through 10 to compare to the West. Now, here's the West. At 5, Phoenix with a record of 55-27. 6, Utah at 54-28. 7, Dallas at 51-31. 8, Denver at 50-32. Golden State Warriors at 9 with a record of 48-34. And at 10 was the Portland Trailblazers at 41-41. Every team in the Western Conference playoffs had 50 wins or more. Do some of you younger generation understand now why LeBron making the playoffs for all those years in a row isn't really impressive.
Into '09, Odin assumed to return healthy. This looked to be the breakthrough year for the Blazers, and to a degree, it was. During the preseason, Roy would have surgery on his left knee to remove cartilage, which would lead to a few weeks of rehab, yet he would still be ready for the start of the regular season. Odin would play the healthiest year of his career, as he would appear in 61 games this year, starting 39 of them, and would put up some solid numbers. But Roy and Aldridge again stole the show, with Roy taking yet another step towards stardom. He would play 78 games this year, again leading the team in scoring on a career-high 22.6 points per game, which would be the 10th highest average in the league. The Blazers as a whole were also getting good contributions from Steve Blake, Travis Outlaw, and rookie Rudy Fernandez, as after being a bottom 5 scoring offense in Roy's first 2 years, they found themselves in the top half of the league, while boasting a top 5 scoring defense. Roy would also record one of his most famous shots in a November 6th win versus Houston, where he would hit a deep 3 to win it at the buzzer. Then a little over a month later, he would go for a career-high 52 points, while going 5 of 7 from deep in a December 18th win versus Phoenix. And again, his defensive ability was on display with a career-high 10 steals in a January 24th win versus Washington. But more importantly, the Blazers were winning. They were sitting at 32-20 going into the All-Star break, as Roy would again find himself suiting up for the West squad, going for 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists on 7 of 8 shooting. The rest of the year would see the Blazers go 22-8 to finish the season at 54-28, and they would earn their first playoff appearance since 2003. The Blazers would take on the Rockets, who had lost Tracy McGrady for the season earlier in the year. And although the Rockets would win the series in 6 games, it was close, and Roy was further pushing his name into the conversation with the NBA's best, as he would up his scoring to nearly 27 a game while shooting about 46% from the field and 47% from deep. Roy would have 5 games with at least 20 and would erupt for his postseason career high of 42 points on over 55% shooting in a Game 2 Blazers win in response to a Game 1 blowout loss. But outside of Roy and Aldridge, the Blazers didn't get a lot of offense and would struggle on defense, which would end their year. But it was
Real quick, this record right here at 54-28 for the 2008-2009 NBA season, that was good enough to give Portland the 3 seed in the West. So just in 1 year's time, with a fairly healthy Brandon Roy, as you see, he played 78 games, they went from 10th to 3rd in the West.
It saw Roy voted second team All-NBA and finishing with averages of about 22.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. But little did fans know, they had just witnessed Brandon Roy's peak at just 24 years old. So after this year, Roy would sign an extension with the Blazers in the offseason, and the Blazers now looked set for a full year of their trio. But once again, injuries had other ideas. A knee injury would force Odin to miss significant time, as he would appear in just 21 games this year. The Blazers had added some solid veterans in Andre Miller and Juwan Howard, and would also trade for Marcus Camby to make up for the Odin loss. Additionally, they would get an improved season from a second-year Nick Batum, but he would also miss the first half of the year with a shoulder injury. Roy was again having an all-star caliber season, leading the team in scoring, with Aldridge finishing second. Roy would find himself voted to his 3rd consecutive all-star game, but a hamstring injury in January would linger and keep him out of the game. But his scoring was great, with 59 games in double figures and 3 games with at least 40 points. The Blazers continued to feature one of the best defenses in the league, allowing the 3rd lowest points per game, as they were again trending towards 50 wins. But then in the 3rd last game of the year, Roy would suffer a bone bruise in his knee, which would keep him out for the rest of the regular season. But it was also expected to at least keep him out of their first round matchup versus Phoenix. He would miss the first 3 games as Phoenix went up 2-1, but he would show his toughness and dedication by coming back for Game 4, where he would have 10 points off the bench to help the Blazers to a win. But although he would play each game the rest of the series, even starting Game 6, he would struggle after this, averaging over 10 points on a...
Sorry, real quick, this still frame right here, it's kind of sad looking at it as a basketball fan, at least, because you have right here 2 of the biggest what ifs in one image. Brandon Roy on the right and Grant Hill on the left.
6 for 23 from the field in the next 2 games, which were both losses. as the series was over in
What's
6.
J. Rich doing?
But for the regular season, Roy would put up about 21.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game, as he would earn a third-team All-NBA selection. As had unfortunately become the norm, Odin's knees would force him to again miss a full season going into 2011. But sadly, this is where Roy's knees would succumb to the mileage and lack of cartilage. Roy would play in 23 of the first 26 games of the year, and although his scoring output was down, he was still putting up points. However, his usual efficient shooting had taken a hit, as Aldridge was emerging as the team's top option, with Roy clearly not at 100%. He would sit out for about a month after December 15th game, and on January 13th, it was announced that Roy would need surgery on both knees and would be out indefinitely. Roy would return after the All-Star break with the Blazers sitting at 32 and 24. However, Roy was now coming off the bench with limited minutes and restrictions. He would play 24 more games this year, however would play over 25 minutes just 3 times, and score in double figures just 6 times. But the Blazers were still able to finish with a 48 and 34 record, which got them a matchup with the Dallas Mavericks in round 1. Roy would continue in his bench role, but
Seattle
would play in
boys.
every game of a 6-game series loss for Portland. He would get over 26 minutes in game 1, but have just 2 points on 1 of 7 shooting. Then would get just 8 minutes of playing time in game 2, going scoreless. He found his shot in game 3 as he went 6 for 10 from the field and scored 16 points. And the Blazers got their first win of the series. But then in game 4, they looked to be on the verge of falling behind 3-1, as late in the third quarter, they were down by 23. And going into the fourth, they had an 18-point deficit to overcome. But Roy showed Blazers fans he still had one more heroic moment left in him. In the fourth, Roy would score 18 points of his own, with clutch shots like a 4-point play with just over a minute left to tie the game. Then he would get into the lane to bank in a floater with less than 40 seconds left to put Portland ahead, and they would hold on to win, as this win would tie the series. Roy would get his most playing time of the series in games 5 and 6, but couldn't get anything going, as he averaged just 6.5 points in the final 2 losses. But for Roy's shortened season, he averaged about 12 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. It was clear that Roy's knees were in bad shape, but at just 27 years old, with an extended period to rest and rehab his knees due to the lockout that occurred during the summer of 2011, hopefully Roy could come back fresh and not have to put so much wear and tear on his knees in the shortened 2012 season. But that's not at all what happened.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Hamler, Dennis Scott, Ronnie Thompson, and we right now are covering a basketball tragedy. Brandon Roy, after just 5 years in the NBA, forced to retire, lacking cartilage in both knees.
So on December...
Real quick, this right there. Yet another bad luck moment for Brandon Roy and the Portland Trailblazers. Portland as a team has had some bad luck with several players. I kind of touched on it a little bit, but Bill Walton had chronic foot, back, knee, and ankle issues, but he at least won them a title in 1977. Sam Bowie, who was drafted before Michael Jordan, fractured his left tibia in the 1985 to 1986 season, and then fractured his right tibia in the 1986 to 1987 season. And the video is already mentioned Greg Oden and Brandon Roy.
2011, Roy made the announcement that his knees had degenerated too much, and it had become career-ending. After just 5 years, with 3 All-Star appearances and 2 All-NBA selections, a player who had been making noticeable progress each year was forced to call it quits in what should have been his prime, resulting in one of the biggest what-ifs in recent history. But wait a second.
I want to welcome...
I forgot all about this.
...as the newest member of the Minnesota Timberwolves family today.
Roy had undergone plasma therapy about 6 months after his retirement and said his knees felt good enough to come back. Unfortunately, he couldn't return to Portland due to the amnesty clause being used on him during his retirement. So after garnering interest from a few teams, Roy would sign with the Timberwolves for the 2013 season. Roy was supposed to team up with Kevin Love and Ricky Rubio
on
to get
paper,
the T-Wolves
it would have been a good
trio.
team.
And according to Roy, he was feeling good after training camp and wasn't having any knee discomfort. But an unlucky collision in a preseason game led to him re-injuring his knee. He would still be back to begin the regular season and even would put up 10 points, 5 boards, and 6 assists in his debut. But then after just 5 games, He would require surgery again, which would eventually become season-ending and career-ending. And for his 5 games, he averaged about 6 points, 3 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. In recent years, Roy has had success as a high school coach. But it was during his half-decade with the Portland Trailblazers that Brandon Roy showed you everything he was about. Heart, toughness, work ethic, and unselfishness. He had it all. And combining those intangibles with one of the most complete skill sets in the league at that time, there was no way Roy wasn't going to be a star. The only thing that could stop him was something out of his control. And he tried everything to not let those injuries cut his career short. An elite two-way player who was going to help lead the Blazers back to what they were 15 years earlier. Brandon Roy was respected by players, coaches, and fans, and was improving every year until the injuries hit. Nowadays, Brandon Roy is still a name people recognize, and still a player whose highlight plays and signature performances get brought up here and there. But as a whole, he was a complete player, whose overall body of work can be overlooked because of how short his career was. But Brandon Roy was exactly as his nickname said. He was the natural. But that's it for today's episode on Brandon Roy. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his brief Blazers teammates, or this one on another player whose career was cut short by injuries. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
In closing, I feel Brandon Roy had the skill set to be a star, and others around the NBA will also say the same things. Charles Barkley once told Michael Jordan to draft Brandon Roy. Jamal Crawford said, "Before I played with Kawhi Leonard, he was the best player that I played with." Kobe Bryant once said, "Roy has no weaknesses in his game." I told him that I don't know any player outside of myself that has no weaknesses besides him. And you all remember Ron Artest at the beginning of this video say, he's probably the best player that I've played against. You know, Brandon Roy could get it done on all 3 phases of the game. He can finish, he had a mid-range game, and he could shoot the 3. Thank you guys for watching this video. I appreciate all of your guys' comments, your likes, and if you want to see more content like this, like, share, and subscribe. And if you like this channel that I'm reacting to, Forgotten Player Profiles, feel free to sub up to them as well. Thank you. Have a nice day, guys.